Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday forum and to our budget forum. As I hope you know, in the Episcopal Church, a parish's budget is approved by the vestry or chapter in the case of a cathedral. And so after months of work by Erin and Betsy and Kathleen, we were presented with a budget. We looked at it in December, and then we looked at it again in January, and chapter passed the 2022 operating budget at our last meeting earlier this month. So this is, you're not going to be voting on the budget, but we do want you to know as much as you want to know about it. So I'm very grateful to Erin and Betsy, and they're going to make this presentation and tell us all about the budget after we pray. So let us pray. O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us always thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
All right, thank you, Penny. Good morning and welcome to the Budget Forum. We today are going to give you an overview of the finances for the 2022 and talk about what's new. I am Betsy Monsell, I am your treasurer, and Erin Sacco Pineda is also with us today. She's the director of finance for the cathedral. And Erin is she's a CPA, and she has her own private accounting firm, and she is an expert in church finances. She does the financial work for a number of parishes within the diocese. And so we are very fortunate to have her with us. With that, let us turn to the next slide, which is what's new for 2022. Erin, can you move there we go. All right. So I'm sure you've noticed this large building going up next to the cathedral, which will provide us new space. So the cathedral will have space on the first floor and the second floor of the new building. The first floor is going to be new meeting space. And then the second floor is office space for the cathedral offices. Plus, we will have parking spaces in the underground garage, 70 parking spaces, and including some electric chargers, which is very exciting. So as we went through the budgeting process this year, we did our very best working with Kathleen and Erin to estimate what the new costs to operate the new building are. And we know we'll probably have some surprises, but we tried to get as close as we could to estimate what those costs will be. Okay, next slide, Erin. All right, this is our total operating budget for 2022. The total budget is about $1.7 million for the year. That's up about $150,000 over our budget last year, because we envisioned that we would be returning to a more normal operating year. Our budget last year factored in lower income and lower costs during the pandemic. This year, we believed when we were working on the budget in the fall that we would be back to more normal operations. January has been a little bit of a surprise, and we're not sure exactly what will happen from now, but in any case, we'll be fine, because what we found during the pandemic was, although income was a little bit lower because since we didn't have income from the plate that we pass during the services, but we also found that expense lower. So this is starting at the top of the chart. Very fortunate to have income from a number of represent the big So pledges are pledged, and we factor in a little bit less for people. And so the pledge income is $8,000. That year represents about 66.
You're breaking
Then
up.
other
We cannot
income
hear you.
use and
Hello.
program income.
Hello.
See, you're breaking up a lot. We're
Yeah.
catching
Okay.
every other word.
Yeah.
Or
Oh dear.
yes.
All right.
Yes, I have one recommendation for
Yes.
the rest of us who are non-essential to the meeting, other than viewing. If we just go ahead and hit the stop video button on most of our personal screens, like so, that might help us with the throughput for Betsy's audio. That's the only real suggestion I have. Sorry to interrupt, Betsy.
Okay. Yeah, I got a message that my internet was unstable, but it seems to be okay now. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So our pledge income, together with plate and other offerings, which is in the lower left hand part of your pie chart, total income for the year. Then as annual giving, which is facility use and program income. And that's largely rental income that we receive from groups who use the facilities at the cathedral and rent room space. And we're also factoring in that we'll have income from parking spaces during the year. Our plan is to rent out parking spaces when the cathedral does not need them, and generate some additional income to the cathedral. We're very fortunate that we have an endowment fund, and that endowment fund provides us annual income, investment income. That's about a little over $100,000 a year. And I'll just make a plug right now for the endowment funds. It's a wonderful thing for people to provide for the cathedral in their estate planning. It's a simple thing to do, and I encourage everybody to do it. We are blessed that we have an endowment fund that people have given to for over 100 years now, and that provides significant income to the cathedral forever, in perpetuity in the future, which is wonderful. We also have some special funds that people give to, like Friends of Cathedral Music, Children, Youth, and Families, a number of groups in the cathedral that help support the operating fund during the year. And then finally, the cathedral has a subsidiary, the Nutmeg and Olive LLC, and that subsidiary owned the property next to the cathedral that was the old apartment buildings and a parking lot that we sold to be developed where the new building is now. And so the proceeds of that sale of land have been invested, and that generates significant income to the cathedral on an annual basis. That's over it's $312,000 for 2022. So that's our total budget of income for the year. We can go to, let's see, I see something in the chat. Okay, all right, that's fine. All right, the second chart shows where the money goes. The first one shows where does the money come from? The second one shows where does the money go. Our total budget for expenses is also $1.7 million. We plan to generate a break-even budget every year. So basically what comes in goes out to support the ministries of the church. And in total on this chart, salaries and benefits for our staff amount to a little over $1 million a year. That's also 66% of the total. So kind of one of the ways I look at it is the annual giving from the congregation and pledges and other gifts support the salaries and benefits for the staff. And then all other expenses are taken care of by the other types of income that we have, is one way to look at it. So our expenses, starting from the top of the chart and then working clockwise, are split up among various ministry areas of the church: worship and liturgy, which support our worship services; music and the arts, music supports the worship services; Christian formation; outreach and mission; community life and pastoral care, which is a lot of the social activities that we have, and the pastoral care for the members of the congregation. Evangelism for the city is really public relations and supporting outside events that we do, like Pride and some other things. And then administration and governance, all the things that go on in the office, paying the utilities, insurance, and various other just annual expenses. And then 10% of everything, actually 10.5% of all of our income goes to support the diocese. So that with $1.1 million of next slide. Aaron.
You have it?
There we go. Okay. All right. So the change in our budget from last year to this year, the budget is increased $148,000, and over $50,000 of it is increased expenses as we regather and return to full operations, we certainly hope. Over $50,000 is new expenses for the new building. So we will have new space to ensure, additional telecommunications equipment. We will have 2 new elevators, one that goes from the garage up into the new building space, and one that goes from the garage to the plaza close to the cathedral. And we have elevator maintenance contracts for both of those elevators. Additional utilities and supplies. And we've also planned a grand opening weekend, open house, so that everybody can come see. We did provide, costs are going up. Everybody knows we've got some inflation going on this year, and we've provided for a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for our staff. And we have also had some additional increases in staff compensation. So that totals about $43,000. Our common life share, which is the commitment that we make last year, because we had a reduced budget for years. So that helped us, and all of their expenses lumped together is about $3,000. That is in our budgeted income and expense for this year. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Erin now to take you through the ministry areas.
Okay, I'm hoping that some of the communication issues are not my IT system. I sometimes have here at our house 2 people on Fortnite and 2 people on Zoom. So I don't think that's happening this moment, and we'll hopefully be on track. So we've divided up the next part of our presentation the way we have in the past, so we can kind of detail what goes on in each of our department, each of our budget areas. And also at the bottom of each of these slides, you'll notice that we have compensation and benefits figures and direct costs for each department. The compensation and benefits include, in almost all cases, allocated portions of different kinds of, or different staffing. So the clergy, for example, the dean especially, it's hard to say, how much time does she spend on each of the oversight and involvement of various activities. So her compensation is allocated between multiple areas. And then administrative costs and buildings and grounds costs are also one of those areas where it's a little bit difficult, to say like who is the facility staff or the admin staff supporting in any one moment. So some of those costs are allocated also in the compensation and benefits. So the worship and liturgy department, primarily is the department head is Brooks Mason, and he directs a lot of the volunteers and the activities and calendaring of all of the various services that we have at the cathedral. And so we also have in this department, in the direct costs, we have a lot of expenses that get incurred for in the past, as you'll recall, we had copying and printing. We've tried to, over the past couple of years, to negotiate some of those costs down. During the pandemic or during the shutdown, it ended up being a good timing thing last year that one of our 2 copiers, the lease came up. And so we were able to reduce expenses this last couple of years to go down to 1 copier. But with our staffing being split into 2 buildings, when we move into the new building, we're going to be going back to 2 copiers. And so Kathleen's been doing a great job negotiating for the kind of the right scale and size and cost for what we really need. So that is part, we are allocating 2/3 of the copier costs and the printing costs into worship and liturgy. Another thing that is included in the worship and liturgy department is some of the costs of special services that I know that we all are going to be excited to get back to, like the Palm Sunday Samba dancers and the Zydeco band and a lot of those fun things that we do. Those costs get allocated to this area. The next area is music and the arts. And obviously the music staff is a big part of this program. I know that this spring we are getting the choristers, or we're hoping to get the choristers going again, the children's choirs. So that's exciting, although maybe Omicron, we're not, we're sure that the timing of some of this now. In 2021, and we'll obviously be, Betsy will be talking more about this maybe at the annual meeting next week, but one of the big areas of reduced expense actually was because we were not able to return to a full complement of choir members for the bulk of the year. And so that was a big reduction in cost that we saw in 2021, but I know that's a painful reduction because we all miss the music, the fullness of the music. My cat is about to join us. Hold on one second. Okay, stop. Okay. The costs of the music program also include things like organ maintenance, supplies and sheet music, licensing, that sort of thing that's needed. We also have as many of you know, for our high holy services, we'll bring in other musicians. And so those come in under this department. We did actually receive a gift a couple of years ago, a special gift for some of those special music costs to offset the cost of that. And that happened just before the pandemic. So we are still holding on to those funds and hoping this year will be the year we get to use that to supplement what's going on for the special musicians. The other thing I want to just mention, because we haven't highlighted it in the same way in the slides that we have in the past, is that we have, as Betsy talked about, a couple of different sources of funds outside of our normal operating income and giving. And one of that is we have special funds. Special funds are normally created by folks who have given for a restricted purpose or by chapter earmarking an amount of money to be set aside a certain way. And to the extent that the purposes of the special funds are not different from what we're actually doing in our operation, we will draw funds into the operating budget as income to support those activities. And one of the, as I mentioned, we have some money set aside that was given a few years ago into a special fund for our special music offerings. And another is a few years ago, the Pacific Academy of Ecclesiastical Music, which was at the cathedral, closed their doors and turned over their funds as an endowment to the cathedral to support music. So one of the things we're able to do each year is use earnings that are coming off of the Pacham Endowment Fund to support organ maintenance, for example. So that is those things that we have available to us. I'll mention a couple of other ones as we go on, are really helpful in helping to balance the budget when we have, some periods of increased expense and high inflation like we're in now. The next area is Christian formation. And there is some in the compensation and benefit section of this, there is some allocated costs for oversight by the clergy, as well as some administrative costs. Maya is the only paid staff in the 2022 budget, although we also have had Salvador working on some elements with the Misa congregation. And so I know that that's been a good partnership. And one of the things I know, just because I have kids who are just of youth age, who turned into they went from being godly play kids to youth age kids during the pandemic. Maya reached out to us to make sure that we knew that and invited them to the youth activities. So that has been really nice to see how she has been able to keep, families engaged during this time when we were all at home and, most of us parents losing our minds trying to teach our kids for so many months. So that is a big part of what is going on in Christian formation. One thing that was added back in this year's budget is nursery workers. So we had the nursery, we had closed the nursery, I think from the shutdown is when it started. And so we had let the nursery workers go about a year ago because we weren't sure when this would end. And so that is added back into this year's budget to be able to open the nursery again. The other thing that is also in Christian formation, other than CYF and youth activities, is we have kind of a subdepartment. We subdepartment this area, and we have adult formation expenses also in this area. So primarily what we incur year to year in adult formation is bringing folks here for forums and being able to pay them an honoraria, which is the practice in the church. So that also is included in the direct costs, as well as supplies and curriculum and some money set aside for those sorts of things. The next area is outreach and mission, and we've got Jen Zhao. I think it was a few years ago that we converted leadership in the outreach and mission area to a volunteer and coordinator. And I'm sure most of you know Jen Zhao, who is a spitfire and a big energy and a great advocate for this area. So the compensation area, because it is primarily led by a volunteer, is again, like I said at the top, an allocated portion of clergy and admin to help oversee the activities that are going on. The one thing that we were able to do in this year's budget is increase the amount of grants to other organizations that the outreach committee will be able to oversee. We were able to honor Jen's request of how much the committee wanted to be able to donate from the cathedral. One of the reasons that we're able to do that is that outreach specifically is supported both by awesome volunteers who are very active and really generous folks, but we are lucky to have a number of our oldest endowments. Some of the first funds or first legacy gifts that were given to the cathedral, we were designated specifically for outreach or pastoral related concerns. And so one of the things where we do have each year in terms of income is earnings from those endowments that are drawn out of those endowment accounts and put, like I said, in a special fund so that they're available for outreach purposes. Some of those funds then are further brought into to the operating budget to offset operating costs of the outreach ministry. But that's a really nice way for us to have consistent support. Like Betsy said, a little plug for legacy giving, for consistent support for this ministry. And I believe that the earnings on those endowments, Betsy, tell me if I'm wrong, is about $30,000 a year. It comes off of those very old endowments.
That sounds about right.
I'm going to go back to outreach for just a second. So there's two things. One of the things that often comes up at the budget forum is that outreach on from a monetary standpoint in the operating budget, outreach looks like the thing that we have devoted the least resources to. And so I just want to point out one of the things. This happens actually in all of the churches that I work with. And the reason is twofold. One is a lot of it is driven by volunteers and donations, by individuals. We don't account for those non-cash donations in our financials. So it's not being picked up. All of that non-monetary support and activity is not really being picked up in the operating budget. It's not a good way to represent the breadth and scope of the activities in that area. And then the other reason that it doesn't get picked up in the operating budget is there are a lot of things we might do in partnership, like the slide indicates, with other organizations. So we'll often have fundraising drives that are specifically for another organization. So for example, in the past, there have been shoe drives sponsored by the diocese or backpack drives for St. Mark's. And when we have those kinds of drives, in those cases, neither the income nor the expense hits our operating budget, because we're just acting essentially as a pass-through. So the operating budget essentially only represents the outreach activity where our outreach committee and our staff are making decisions to do either cathedral supported or cathedral sponsored outreach in ministry or granting out to other organizations. It doesn't include all of the various activities that we do in support of other organizations, which in prior years has normally been between $60,000 and $90,000 worth of pass-through activities. So I just think the cathedral community should know that the generosity is there's a huge amount of generosity that's not represented in our operating budget, just because of the way accounting rules work. Okay, moving on to community life and pastoral care. The community life area of our budget feels a little like a catch-all, and to me, and maybe to Richard, because he's brand new and there's lots of different sub areas that he's now got to oversee and see his, have his hands in. And we obviously all know that we've had a turnover in the position of the associate for congregational life this year. But what I also wanted to point out is I think many of you probably are aware that there has been a huge amount of turnover across all industries, I think. This last year and a half, a lot of people, as going from remote working back to their jobs, have either decided to move to different occupations or go back to school. And the churches, to be honest, have not been affected as well. And so I have some church clients who have had a huge amount of turnover. My payroll specialist has been going crazy with new hire packets and final paychecks, and round and round and round this past year. But I think it says something about the cathedral community that we have not had nearly that kind of turnover that some other organizations have been facing. And in our case, we've, been able to sort of launch our associate priest to bigger and better things and welcome someone new and wonderful and who's going to bring such fresh energy to our community. So Richard, welcome. And so again, I just think it's really something to noteworthy to say that we have not had the kind of turnover that some folks have been having. I say that also because Wayne, for example, who is our communications coordinator, has been with us now several years. And his wife just had a baby this year. So, it's kind of that thing where people stick around long enough, you get to see them go through stages of life. The congregational life area, to get back to the budget, sorry, I went off on a little tangent there. Like I said, includes a myriad number of things: community incorporation, welcoming activities, newcomer activities, evangelism, all of our communications related expenses, including audiovisual maintenance, as well as software that we use to do our programs and connect. A new expense this year is that we've invested in a new calendaring software that Kathleen is really excited and Judy are really excited about. We're going to apparently get away from the blue sheets, finally, is my understanding. And with all of these new meeting rooms and spaces that we're going to have available to us in our community and the greater community, it's going to give them opportunities to really offer those for facility use and manage them in a professional way. So they're pretty jazzed about this new calendaring and facility management software. The other thing that we have, as I said, is that the stewardship activities are in this area, and most years we consider doing a legacy event for those folks who are in the Legacy Society, and then our hospitality or other offerings and costs related to our annual campaign have varied the last few years because of the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how we come out and do those activities differently. In evangelism for the city, we have this year we have somebody, I don't know, Penny, what is, or Richard, what is Susan's position?
Susan Chester is our newcomer and incorporation and evangelism consultant.
So we're lucky to have Susan to be able to continually working with us this year. And I know that the committee is sort of relaunching, the Cathedral for the City Committee is relaunching with some activities, and they made a request to us during the budget process to fund some events that we have not had in the budget previously. So some of these are listed here. I think St. Patrick's Day Parade, while we would do some activities, it was kind of having, to borrow a little bit here and there to make those happen. So we were specifically able to set aside some resources for them for that. December Nights is another one that has come and gone, one year, another year, 1 year in, another year out. But I think one of the things this committee has been trying to do the last few years, and obviously the pandemic was disruptive, is to establish some more of community engagement. Because we're so lucky to be in this location and have all of these things that happen in Balboa Park as an example, where we've got, literal thousands and thousands of people coming by our space. So I think that is a really exciting thing that we have and are being able to continue and relaunch hopefully this year. And then under administrative and governance, I just want to point out that this baby down here in Molly's arms is like 5 now, or how old is Charlie at this point? So
think that's Iris, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think
Oh,
that,
it's
okay.
Iris.
Charlie's 5.
yeah, I think that picture's been the same the last 5 years. I could be wrong, but my picture is like 8 years old. So anyway, so the team that does administrative activities obviously were led by Kathleen Burgess, the Director of Administrative Operations. And Kathleen does a great job sort of pulling us all together and juggling all of the pieces. Something that's new this year that is in relation, because we are sort of, the LLC, Nutmeg and Olive that Betsy mentioned, you know, is sort of changing in terms of its relationship with us. As we move into the new building is technically, our spaces are owned by the LLC. And so there's a lease that's being managed and negotiated between the church and the LLC.
For $1 a year.
Exactly. Yeah, no cost. Just in
Still a
terms of,
38-page lease for a $1 a year.
of course it is, right? So the main thing to have the lease is obviously to make sure that all of the pieces of who's responsible for what and to have that all laid out and be very clear. It's been helpful. The work that LLC managers have been doing these last, year to 6 months has been really helpful to us as we moved into this budget process, because a lot of what was complicated about the 2022 budget and beyond was in which budget does certain things lie. So for example, insurance, who's responsible for what in terms of the insurance. The association that is managing the whole of the building, what is their responsibility for insurance in terms of what's included in the common area maintenance fee? What portion does the LLC need to be responsible for as the property, the unit owner, as it were? And then what portion does the cathedral need to be responsible for as the quote unquote tenant? So we've, got these little levels of complexity. Another area that got resolved this year as it pertains to the budget too is there will now be 3 elevators on the cathedral campus and that are for our use. And so the cathedral's budget now includes maintenance of those 3 elevators, for example. So those kinds of things have been a big kind of new part of the budgeting process. And as Penny said, Kathleen has been a great partner and a great support in helping us gather all of that information, and working with the LLC managers has been really great too. So as I said, insurance was a way that's been impacted in this year's budget. Another place that was impacted is telephones and IT. This has really been impacted by the pandemic. As everyone moved home, anyone who didn't already have a laptop needed a laptop, but we still had desktops at church. And we were going, back and forth, sometimes at home, some working remotely, sometimes people were in the office. So our IT company had almost twice as many computers, I believe, that they were supporting. So some expenses have ticked up in that area, as well as just incurring the cost of purchasing some new computers. So that's another wave that's forthcoming. As Betsy said, we kind of did our best this year to foresee what expenses we knew were going to happen. We built in some spaces, some one-time costs. So for example, I think Kathleen said we have 5 new bathrooms in the new building. And so, for example, we built in a kind of a one-time, furnishing of uptick in all of our bathroom supplies, right? So right around March or so in the budget. So that was part of the complexity, and it did hit administration, and then also buildings and grounds, like Betsy said, was a big area. And then as Betsy said, because the common life share that we pay to the diocese is based on a trailing number. It's calculated based on our activities of 2 years prior. Because we had reduced activities in 2020, our common life share has gone down for 2022 relative to 2021. Okay, and this is a representation of the operating budget. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Do you want to talk about this one, Betsy?
Sure. So here you can see the whole budget for 2022 and also in comparison with 2021. As we've said, the total income is $1,740,000 and the total operating expenses for 2022 are $1,740,000, which gives us a bottom line of $582. So that's basically our break-even budget for the year. And we would be happy to take any questions or comments that you have.
Don't forget to unmute if you're trying to ask questions. Shall we stop the screen? There we go. Thank you. And more people can see each other. So a lot of work went into this. The detail, I mean, I don't know that I would ever have thought about needing extra money in March to stock the new bathrooms. That kind of thought just blows my mind.
That's all Kathleen.
Okay, Diane asks, what's the best way to make up the difference in income and expenses?
I'm not sure I understand that question. So our income is just a little bit higher than our expenses. So
500 and some dollars out of a 1.7 million.
$582. So we'll have a profit of $582 at the end of the year. And usually it comes in, several thousand or $10,000 or $20,000 one way or another, which is just about as close to break even as we can get. Okay.
Let me also comment kind of in relation to that question. We're in a sort of an interesting transitional point, as I understand church finances, and just a nod maybe from Penny or Richard from what they understand. There's kind of a click wheel of saying that like churches either have strong giving or big endowments, but not both. I've heard that said. And so we're in that interesting, you might even say sweet spot where actually prior to what I've seen in the last 8 or so years that I've been working with the cathedral and other churches is that we actually were ahead of, because of our LLC, because of the success of I should say probably how long, and we've had enduring funds growing. We already had started to broaden our resources or our sources of income ahead of what I'm hearing a lot of other churches realize more recently as a result of the pandemic or just before, that they were going to need to broaden and diversify income sources. Because in the church, I think, as we all know, maintaining a stable pledge base is a success at this point. So having us move from, I would say maybe, and I'm just going to go off the cuff here, maybe 20 years ago at the cathedral, pledging was, 80-85% of our income. And now it's 66% of our income. That's not a bad thing, because we have been able to make changes and grow other areas in order to support our ministries. So I just wanted to kind of comment on that. We obviously still want to grow our membership and grow our giving, but we're lucky to have all of the resources that we have.
And I'll just add to that, right now we're at 248 pledges for 2022, and last year we had 279. So I'm certain that most people on this call have already pledged, but if you haven't, we'd still like to hear from you, because we'd like to wrap up the pledge campaign next week at the annual meeting and make it a big success. And we've been working very intentionally on plans to diversify our revenue. We've had a revenue research task force working throughout the pandemic, professionals in marketing and event planning who are getting us a wonderful packet that will be very professional for making our spaces available to the community in different ways. And the chancel remodel is part of that as well. And the new building with the gorgeous new guild room that's just been glazed is going to be a great part of that too. And to answer Jasmine, I think it was Jasmine's question, we are still on track to move in March. The project has only slipped by a month, which is quite astonishing for the size of the project. So fingers crossed that it'll brighten our Lent to move into the new building.
Right. And I just would like to build on Erin's comments. We are very fortunate that we do have a number of sources of income. But that is mostly thank you to the congregation, current and past congregations. And we, going into the pandemic, we really didn't know how our income would hold up. But fortunately, everyone has been really faithful with their pledge giving. And that has been so wonderful to see. And so I thank all of you for that, because we just didn't know. We didn't know. And we have been really blessed that everybody kept their pledges up and on a timely basis, which helped a lot. Other churches were not as fortunate and had to cut back on some activities, and we've been able to carry on with all of our ministries. So thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Huge thanks to Betsy and Erin.
We do have a question in the Great Hall. Hang on a second.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
And thank you, Bob, for taking care of the Great Hall.
Yeah, the Andrew Rink's question was, is there a capital fund drive that's going to be launched?
Bet. That's we had started that process by the listening campaign last year, and we got everybody's dreams sort of out on the table, and they seem to align with what we were expecting, which was wanting to focus on building our music ministry and our outreach ministry, especially our ministry with the unsheltered folks. And so we did the listening phase. We completed that phase. Then Jeff announced he was leaving, so we put it on hold until we had staff back in place. So that is about to gear up. In fact, I am actively soliciting names of potential campaign consultants who know San Diego and the nonprofit market. So if you know somebody who's just a hot dog capital campaign consultant, please let me know, because we want to get this moving and get onto the feasibility study. I'll be talking a bit more about that at the annual meeting next week. Okay.
Yeah, and Andrew wanted to be sure we were clear on the distinction between our regular stewardship and the capital campaign for building new stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, does somebody want to, Betsy or Richard, do you want to jump in and give a quick teaching on that?
Maybe Richard.
Sure. I apologize because I was in the middle of chat with somebody else about something else. What was the question again? I was taking care of things.
Clarify the distinction between our regular day-to-day, year-to-year pledging and stewardship versus a capital campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the quickest teaching I can give on that is that one is kind of average operational costs, where one helps us aspire to whole new missions and ministry. So the capital campaign will help align our visions and our goals and our desires more with the building, essentially. So aligning our values with how we literally want our space shaped. That's, I think, the quickest way I can say it. So happy to have addendums to that, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Pledging comes out of our regular income. So I get paychecks every month. I give out to my pledge every month out of what comes in and out. a capital campaign typically is part of your long-term planning, your long-term savings or your estate planning. It's a lump sum that has a particular effect on the future of the cathedral.
But the trick is to be sure that one gets folded into the other or kept separately, so people don't get confused and say, well, I gave X many dollars to the building campaign, and then comes along the stewardship campaign and it gets muddled. I think that needs to be thought through carefully by the administration powers, so that there isn't confusion that can backfire and therefore make it tough on the fundraisers.
Thank you for saying that,
'Cause
Andrew.
That's my point. It's a marketing issue. I understand what you just told me, Rich, but I'm concerned in some of the experience I've had that there needs to be a smooth operational marketing program so that people know which one they're giving to and how it's being used and all that. That's all.
You are 100% correct, Brother Andrew. And that is very much on the minds of the stewardship committee as well. One of the first things that was asked when I came on board was, is this going to be stewardship's responsibility? And the answer is no, because it needs to be a completely separate piece. So the capital campaign will have its own group running on this, and we will have a lot more discussions about this as staff and volunteers before anything gets rolled out publicly, more so than right now. So your point is well taken. We hear you, we understand you, and we will work on that.
And if I can just add, the last time that the cathedral did a capital campaign was for the organ restoration back in 2011, 12, 13. And I will speak with some knowledge, having been on chapter at the time and then taking over the accounting after that. That was an unfortunate moment on the accounting side of the church's capabilities to manage something like that administratively. We are set up far, far better now to make sure that our records are clear. Because I also know, to Andrew's point, if the back office is not well prepared to manage multiple pledges going on from a certain giver at a time, things could get very messy and does disrupt the capabilities of the fundraisers.
We are in so much better
Thank
shape
you.
now.
I just want to commend everybody. I've always thought that these affairs could be terribly boring, but I've really enjoyed the last few years, and it's a delight to find out we're on the positive side going into this new year. It's very exciting to see everything come together. And it's lovely to see the faces of so many of the volunteers and people that work in the office and in the cathedral. So kudos to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. That's very nice. We appreciate that.
Okay, everyone. Next week there is no 9 o'clock forum, but please do sign into Zoom for the 11:45 annual meeting, where we'll do some celebrating and hear a little bit more about everything that's hopefully going to happen in 2022. So thank you all. Any final words from staff? No. Okay, I hope to see, well, I hope you will see us on the live stream for the 10:30 service in about 35 minutes. God bless. Bye-bye.